Hello, this is Greybeard. I promised that I'd get this video out probably yesterday technically, but it's 1:40 a.m. and I'm here trying to get this video done. I wanted to go through it. This video is to show you how to make your own custom bed skirt. Filament Frenzy put on Twitter a picture of something he was printing, and we noticed that he had this awesome bed skirt on the printer that had his logo built into it. You might want a bed skirt on your printer if you are at a show printing something as an additional way to put your logo out there creatively. Or maybe if you're doing time lapses, you might want to have a custom bed skirt for that too. It's just another way to brand yourself. So I came up with a way of doing it because Filament Frenzy got it done by Greg 3D, and he used a lot of math, and it's too much math. I don't have time for it, so I came up with an easier way, and I'm going to show you how I did it here. Essentially, you can do it in Cura. You can also do it in Slick 3R or Slicer. And I made the model using TinkerCAD, but you can also make the model just using plain old graphics software. It is pretty easy to do. And the actual process is simply make a type of mask. You import the mask into your slicer. Then you go ahead and essentially just print the outline of your mask, and then save the outline as G-code and import that G-code into your start G-code. It sounds like a lot, but I'm going to walk you through every little step of that, and you can go ahead and watch it. So I'm going to start with Slick 3R, then the next portion is going to be Cura, and then the final portion is going to be how to do it with a graphic in Cura, because Cura can import a graphic. So I do appreciate if you do watch it all, but if you do have a very specific software you use, you can either watch the Slick 3R section or the Cura section. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to create a bed skirt for 3D printing. We're going to use both Cura and Slicer, or Slick 3R, to create this bed skirt. Either program works, and it will probably work with other slicers too. The first method I'm going to show you is using TinkerCAD. TinkerCAD is a free online program that you can use to create or modify models. It's at tinkercad.com. So we're going to hit Create New Design. And here we have our TinkerCAD workspace. TinkerCAD always creates a bogus name for you. So we're going to change this name, and we're going to call it our bed skirt. Alright, that's pretty easy. Alright, so here we have our work plane, and over here we have our toolbox. Now if you have a Delta printer with a round bed, you're going to want to use a cylinder for this, but for most of our printers we're going to use one of these boxes, and we're going to drag it out into the field by left clicking on it and dragging, and then we're going to adjust it. Now when we adjust it, you'll notice that you have some controls over here. However, there's an issue with these controls that you can't go over 200, and some of our printers are bigger than 200. So we're going to ignore all this for now, and we're going to use the controls out here. So we'll click on this corner, and we're going to go ahead and type in the width of our bed for this, or the length of our bed for this, and that our length is going to be our y-axis typically for your printer. So I have a Prusa Mark III, and my y-axis is 210 millimeters. You can look up the specs of your printer at your manufacturer website. So I'm going to go ahead, and I could type the 210, but I'm going to subtract just a little bit just to make it a little bit easier on the slicer. You can force it all the way to the edge of the printer, that's fine. Then you can scroll out with your mouse wheel if you can't see the bottom number anymore. Then I'm going to look at the width of the bed, and for the Prusa it's 250, but I'm again going to subtract 2 millimeters. So I can, again, save the printer some headache, or the slicer some headache. With your right mouse button, you can kind of rotate the view, because we're going to adjust this middle one. Right now it's set to 20 millimeters. Typically what you want to do is you want to set this skirt to be what you usually print at. For me, I'm going to print at 0.2, and you could do this at 0.2. And then after you save it as STL, you could then change it to another bed height and save it again. or another layer height and save it again. But you do want to set it to your layer height. I think if you use the wrong layer height and you go ahead and print, or maybe if you use a thinner layer height, you're not going to run into any problems, but it's just easier to just make a couple. Alright, so now we have this sheet here that represents our bed, this nice rectangle. And we're going to go ahead and put a logo in it or something else. And an easy way is we can come up here to the selector. We can go ahead and choose text and numbers. And we can go ahead and put some text. So for me, I'm going to do a G down there. Scroll up and find the B, drag that out. I don't know why that just scrolled. I apologize. My mouse is going crazy here. It's courtesy of Apple. I don't know why it is scrolling for me. And then I'm going to go find the numbers, and the numbers are going to be on page 2. So I'm going to choose page 2, and we're going to go ahead and grab our 3, and then we're going to go back to page 1, and we're going to find the D. So GB3D, that might be the logo I'm going to go with for this. If you have a logo in another STL, you can use that to cut out instead of using the letters, or you can even use a SVG for it. And I apologize. In fact, I'm going to switch to my trackpad because that mouse is being really wonky. I haven't charged it in probably a week. So now I'm just going to click on these letters and drag them so they are spaced evenly. I don't have to worry right now about the alignment. I just want the spacing to be somewhat even. TinkerCAD does not have a great way of distributing objects. Then I'm going to hold down Shift and click all of them. So now we have all 3 selected, or all 4 selected. So we also see here we have 4 shapes. We're going to click up here the Align tool. And this is going to let us align all these letters. And we're going to align it at the bottom. Just make sure the bottom is even on all of these letters. Alright, so that's aligned. It's looking good. Even the trackpad is not playing well with me. So I turned off the Align tool, and I have this selected. And I'm going to go ahead and use the up arrow to move the letters into place. Now, if you need more precision for this, right now I have my grid set to 0.1 millimeter. This is how far it's going to move every time you click the arrow or everything you drag around. It does default to 1.0, which can be coarse. So at 1.0, it's pretty big moves. And if you really want to get your precision, you can go ahead and do 0.1. Okay, we have all that. That looks really good. Now we're going to go ahead and group these letters together. So you see they all change the same color, and they're grouped together, and we want to make sure that they're slightly overhanging the bottom of our build surface. So they are slightly overhanging. We're going to select them. Then we're going to go ahead and make them a hole by using this hole feature up here. And then we're going to hold down Shift and select the bed. And finally we're going to group again. And you'll notice that it cut them out. They are now nothing more than empty space on this big plane here. So now that we have that, that's really good, but these letters here have islands in the middle, and that's not necessarily good for what we're trying to do. It will work at least with Slick 3R. Cura, I have not tested it, but it will work, but it's going to come back and it's going to draw these islands after it does everything else. And if we want everything to be one motion, we'll want to do something about this. There's two options you have. You can delete the islands by grabbing one of these empty boxes out here and just kind of size it so it covers the island. And once you covered the island, you can go ahead and group both together again. So you can do it that way. Let me undo that. Another option you have is you can bring out another box And with this box, you can make it narrow. So we're going to click this corner here so we can type in some numbers. So we'll make this narrow, probably the width of 2 times our nozzle. It's got to be at least that. My nozzle is a 0.4, and because of over extrusion, or not over extrusion, but extrusion width settings, I'm going to make that a 0.9 just to make sure there's plenty of room. Some printers have a 0.5 nozzle, so you might want to do maybe like a 1.1. It really depends on your printer. The other setting of the length of it, that doesn't matter so much. The other setting that does matter is how tall this is. So we're going to click on that, click on the top here, and set that to the same height that we have everything else. So that is 0.2. Now it's the same height. And what we're doing is we're going to make a little bridge here. So we're going to take this, we have it selected, and we're going to use our arrow keys. Let me switch my setting to 0.1, and we're just going to kind of line these up, and I'm going to go back to a 0.1 and kind of fine tune this. Pretty good with that. I think I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay with that. There might be like a little lip down here, but that's okay. And I'm going to take this again, click it once, and I'm going to come up here to this duplicate and click that. Now I have another one. Let me go back to a 0.1 or a 1.0. Move on over to the D. And go back to a 0.1. And I do apologize for the zoominess. I use shift to drag it over. I don't know what kind of computer you're on, so some of the keys might be different. But the shift drag for me is what carries everything with it. So drag, I guess on a Mac it's a 2-finger click, and then on a PC it's a right click. All right, and that's it. So I'm pretty happy with that. What's happening here is the tool head is going to trace these paths, and we want to give it a continuous motion. So that's what we have here. It's going to just follow this around, and because of this, it's able to come down here and trace these islands too, and then it's going to go on and eventually go over there to the D, and so on, and get down to the end, go over, and go all the way around the bed. So that's really good. Now we have it. Everything is there. We can highlight everything and group it together and export it. But even if you don't have everything highlighted, you can go ahead and hit export anyway. And right here, you just want to make sure that everything in the design is what's going out, and go ahead and save the STL. And when you save the STL, it's going to save it with the same name that you gave it up there. So if you leave it a real funky name, you're going to end up having names that you just don't know what they mean. All right, now we can move on to our slicer. In the slicer, what we want to do is go ahead and open up the model that we created. So we're going to say add. We're going to pick our bed skirt. And there it is. There's no warnings or anything. It looks like we're within the bounds, which is really nice. Now if we slice it, we'll probably get an error, and there's a reason why. Let's see, preview. Yeah, so detect the toolpath outside the print volume. You'll get this error as well if you make the square exactly the same size as your bed. However, I found it worked anyway, and it even printed fine if you make it the exact same size as the bed. However, in this case, we're getting the error because we still have a bed skirt turned on for our bed skirt, which is kind of like repetitive. So we're going to go ahead and turn off certain settings and make this work. So for our print settings, we're going to come into our layers and perimeters, and we're going to make sure that our layer height is the same as what we decided to use. But we're going to go ahead and make our solid layers for our top. We're going to make that a 0, and our bottom, we're going to make that a 0. And we're going to check off spiralized face. It's going to set some stuff for us anyway. And out of that, I think that's going to fix all that. We're going to go down to skirt and brim and make sure that we have our skirt turned off. And I do set minimum extrusion length also to 0, just to be sure that the slicer doesn't decide to do something for us. And let's go back and look at our platter. And so I am on the preview. I use the preview a lot. So I'm on the preview and I'm going to say slice now. And there we have it. You can see that it's drawn this nice design for us. And it handled these cutouts real nice for us. If you make this too narrow, this won't work at all, and these islands will still be separate. So looks really cool. I really like that, and I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, awesome. Let's export that, and we're going to save. And now we're ready to go ahead and grab our G-code. So what we want to do is we want to get just the drawing of this skirt out of this file. Something we should pay attention to first is we should go over to our printer settings and we should see what the last things that this does. So it does a G92 and an M221. So let's go back over to our text editor. G92, I don't see the M221, or there we go, G92 M221. Then it goes into this, let's set some units and whatnot and everything else. So what I want to do is I want to grab everything after that G92 M221. So I'm going to go ahead and click there, go all the way down, and this is where we want to be careful. So all the way down to the bottom, we want to find right before this Z changes. So, and this extrusion change, this is a retraction. The retraction's okay. So what we're going to do is come all the way down to the end of that retraction. So if you see, we're just grabbing everything and we're ignoring like the stuff down here that's going to turn off the heat bed and the temperature. We don't want any of that. We just want our code that makes these lines for us, because this is the hard stuff. Instead of figuring out all the math, we're just going to have the slicer do it for us. So that's great. So we're going to copy that, come back to our slicer, come down to here, and we'll do a little semicolon, and we'll say start bed skirt. Cool. And then we're going to paste in what we copied, and we're going to push enter, and at the end we'll say end bed skirt. Now there are probably some things that we should do after this or right here to perhaps clean up what we've done so far for what the slicer is about to do. However, I found that this still just works, so I went with it. As long as you don't have any Z adjustments in here, you should be okay. And even if you did, the slicer should return back to the proper Z before it starts printing. Once we have that, we're going to go ahead and save this. And what we're going to do is we're going to call it, we're going to leave that name there, but we're going to say bed skirt. So when we want to use it, we have that profile to pick. But when we don't want to use it, we can just pick our other one. So now we're back on our platter, and we're going to go ahead and slice a file. So I'm going to delete everything off of the print bed. And let's see. Let's go ahead and bring in a model here. Now, if you remember, I modified this when setting up the bed skirt. I don't actually want to modify that anymore. I want to go back to default. So I'm just going to click that again and say discard changes. An interesting thing is, although we have a bed skirt, it's still going to generate a skirt around this. You can decide to go into your print settings and turn off that skirt since we have a bed skirt. Or you can leave both. It really doesn't matter. So we are using our bed skirt profile down over here, and we are using our normal print profiles for everything else. So we're good to go. We're going to go ahead and slice. I like to pre-slice. I like to see what it might look like here. Okay. Let's look at our preview. I like to look at our preview. So you'll notice that the bed skirt we created isn't showing up in the preview. And that's because the only thing that's going to show up in the preview is what the slicer worked on. And the start G-code is not something it actually works on. It's just there. But we can see what's showing up here. And that looks good. I mean, I don't see any issues with that slice. So I can go ahead and export it. And we're going to have Captain Greybeard. And we're going to go ahead and say this is with a bed skirt. Awesome. Okay. So you'll see we still don't see it. And we're like, okay, where is it? Now it should be there. And I'm fairly confident in that. But to find out, we're going to go to GCode WS. And we are going to drag our new bed skirt file in. Okay, so now we can see what we have here. So here's Captain Greybeard, but you can see down here we do have our GB 3D. Now you'll notice that it expands beyond this because this is just a simple 200 by 200 bed, and we actually have a 210 by 250. But it's there, and we can go ahead and kind of like rewind or fast forward how it's going to print. So let's rewind, and we can see. And you can see it's starting in the corner, it's drawing these lines, it's going to draw every letter, and then it's going to start drawing Captain Greybeard. You might want to clean your bed before you print one of these, because you might want to, you might have fingerprints on the edges of your bed, because that's where you're going to lift it when you remove prints and stuff like that. So let's go ahead over to Cura and look at how we're going to do it with Cura. Mostly the same process. Cura has a few weird settings, but we're just going to go ahead and look at it. Let's look at Cura here. And Cura has another feature too that Slick 3R doesn't, and that's Cura can import images. So we're going to look at both. So over here we have our print setup. We have our printer. It's the same printer, same build plate. But this would work with anything else. You just have to make the right file. So we're going to go ahead and open our file. I think I'll just drag it in because it's easier. And there's our file. And what I like to do is normally when you come into Cura you get solid view, and you see these hashes. This means it extends beyond the build area of the printer, and that's because we still have the actual skirt on, and we have to turn that off. But for now we're going to go to layer view, and layer view is not going to show us much, mostly because we still have that skirt turned on. So we're going to come over here and fix some things. Layer heights are okay. We're at a 0.2. Our wall thickness is not okay. We don't want that many walls. We only want one wall. Top surface, we want 0 of those. Now if you don't have some of these settings, you might need to turn them on. And to turn them on, you got to click this gear icon right here. When you click that, it's going to bring up a selector, and you can check off what you want on and off. Top and bottom thickness, we're going to set that to 0. Yeah, it doesn't like us now. And top layers, we're going to set that to 0. So it's really angry at us now. Now we have another thing here. We have infill. We want 0 infill. Now Cura is interesting, and I'll tell you in a minute, because you're probably like, oh, there's a quicker way. So all of that's good. Now what we're looking for is we're looking for build plate adhesion, and right now it's set to skirt. We want none, and that's gonna kind of fix. Now you see we have a line, because that's going to fix that. It's now within the print area because that skirt was messing us up. So when we have the skirt on, we kind of don't get anything, and we get unable to slice. But when we have nothing, we're good to go. And that's why I like to be in the layer view, because I can see when I get this right, and I can see what it's going to look like. So there's this Spiralized Contour. This is really interesting, but the problem is it does steadily increase the Z height as it goes around. And the problem with that is not only does it kind of keep changing our Z height, which is really bad, because if we've messed up our Z height and now we start our print. Depending on how it starts, we may not be at the right Z height. But the other problem is, I found it will sometimes decide not to draw some of these lines, or sometimes it will draw over itself. So it'll do a little bit more than a lap. So I ended up just turning that off. And that way we don't even have that Z change. Alright, so I think we're good. Now the great thing about the layer view is if you forget to say set your infill to 0, if you left that on 20, you'll see the effect of it. And it's a quick way to know if you've messed up. So we're going to go back to 0. Okay, so we have it. We go ahead and we save to file the same way before. And we have our bed skirt too. And now we come up here and we're going to modify our printer. So we say manage printer and machine settings. And we look at our last line. So we have the G1 100 and the G92. It really doesn't matter what those are. And we're going to say this is going to be the start of the bed skirt. And we're going to come down, open up our G-code that we made. So this is the Slick 3R G-code, this is the Cura G-code. So there's the G1 100 and the G92, so we know we're going to start here. This is actually a repeat of the previous line, so we can just start here. We're going to drag all this down, or you can scroll to the bottom and shift click. And we're going to look in here. We see this time elapsed, and we can say, okay, well, it's probably about done here. This G0, this is basically just a move. We don't really need a move. We can stay wherever we're at. And so we'll just pick that and copy that, go back to Cura, and we can go ahead and paste that. And finally, we can just put another comment. That's the end of the bed skirt. The reason we put the comments is because when we export this and we're looking at all our G-code, we'll know whether or not we're in the bed skirt or within the object that we're printing with. So we're good to go. We'll close that. Now, Cura does not have an easy way to duplicate a machine. So if you're lucky enough to have a machine that's in their library, you can just go ahead and just add a second machine before you start. So if you have like the CR10 or the whatever the Ender 3 is in here, they just don't really have the Prusa Mark III in here, which is a disappointment. But you could add it, and you could add it with a name like version 2 or bed skirt or whatever you want to put. Alright, so we've done it. Now we can go ahead, I'm going to right click and clear the build plate. I'm going to go back to our normal print settings, which is going to say, hey, you changed all this. So we're going to discard all our changes. So now we're in the right printer profile. We've created the bed skirt. And we're just going to go ahead and put our file in here. Okay. It's done slicing, and we're going to go ahead and save to file. There we have it. Save. Now you'll notice that it starts with Prusa i3 Mark II. I don't know why it says Mark II, but it's fine. Captain Greybeard. So we have that. Now we'll go to GCode WS and see if that still does what we think it's going to do. So GCode WS right here. Find our file. Okay, and down here you see we have the GB3D. So it came out just fine. And we of course have the box all the way around. So we're good to go. Now there's one more thing that you can do with Cura that you can't do with Slick 3R. Let's go ahead and minimize this. So the thing you can do with Cura is you can import graphics. And what's really nice about that is if you're not so good with the modeling software, but you are good with the graphics software, you can make a very similar thing. Let me see if I can get the window to show up. No available windows. This is a Mac problem. All right. Boom. Okay. So it's the same thing in my graphics software. I made a build plate in black, and then I downloaded some Mickey ears, Don't Tell Disney, from Wikimedia Commons. So I downloaded the Mickey ears, and I impose them here, and then I can just go ahead and say File, Export as a PNG. Gives me a bunch of options. I've already set my width to 248 and my height to 208. So those are the correct ones. Okay, here we are with Cura, and we're going to load in our graphic. Now Cura will load in like a PNG file for us, which is what we saved. So we're going to go ahead and say, let's open our Mickey bed skirt. And you'll notice that the height is 10. We don't want 10. We want our layer height, which is 0.2. Base, this is added material. We don't want any base, so we're going to say our base is going to be 0. Width, you'll notice that these are off from our software. That doesn't really matter. It's going to adjust it for us. So we're going to type what our width is. It's 248. We already knew that before. And you'll see lighter is higher. Now we want to know that actually the black area is what we want higher, so darker is higher. Smoothing, that's up to you. We're just going to say OK. Alright, so we have this huge thing, and we have the stripes again, the candy stripes, and that's because we don't have any settings over here. So let's go ahead and fix some of this. So we're in solid view right now, so it's not going to show. We want to go over to layer view, and we can see our outline there. The same fashion, we save it to file, and we put it within our settings, and we're good to go. That's how you can get a cute little logo down here or whatever else. Just remember, you don't want any islands. I mean, if you have an island, that's fine, but I would say it's easier not to have any, so you can do it all in one path. But that's it. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, just let me know in the comments below. Please subscribe. I'm trying to get out 200 videos this year. I'll see how I do. And again, check out my website, greybeard3d.com. I have all these different filaments reviewed. It's 400 of them. And also go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Thank you very much.